Hi guys, it's Jill from Wildstrong. This is an excerpt from one of our most recent sessions. We took a lot of time looking at clinical guidelines and best practices, plus Andrew's 20 plus years as a coach, to look at injury prevention, particularly around ACL injuries. So while this video is a coaching video for our coaches, we also thought it would be useful to share it with you because a lot of you are runners and there's loads in here about injury prevention. We look at stabilizing and strengthening around the joint, around the knee joint, what you can do and how you can start to think more about building in these exercises into your daily routines to build up your knee strength as you get older, really. If you look down below, we've linked to some really interesting studies as well. There's a whole wealth of research out there. Hope you find it really helpful, and please just shoot us a message if you have any questions at all.
We've got a nice learning session today. So this one came out also of the last course that we taught, and I was just talking a little bit about landing from boxes and knee position. I realized that most of the new students hadn't really thought much about knee injuries or ACL injuries, so I thought it would be nice to design a session based around that, just give people opportunities to learn, talk a little bit about landing quality, jump quality, etc. So the why of today is we're going to focus a lot about learning about knee injuries and prevention, specifically talking about ACL injuries in women. This session is designed to have lots of small peer coaching elements to give people an opportunity to look at position and look at joint alignment, look at landing positions, things like that, get them to start thinking about trying to develop better motor patterns to help prevent injuries. And then it's also designed as conditioning that will help strengthen the whole support structure around your knees, and also challenge good positions so you can think about how to use those positions under stress. I want to take a second to talk about women and ACL injuries. In the sheet, I provided lots of good links and papers and things like that, but I'll go ahead and give you the quick summary. Essentially, women have much higher rate of ACL injuries. So ACL injuries, you have these major ligaments in your knee. The ACL is the anterior one, so the frontmost of these three ligaments, along with the MCL and the LCL. But it doesn't really matter what it's called. It's just that for whatever reason, when women play sports, they have a much higher rate of injury. Amongst female football players, it's like 6 times the injury rate that men would have. And then across all other sports, it's anywhere from about 2 to 4 to 6 times higher based on hours played and number of players and things like that. So people really started noticing this disparity probably in the 90s, when we really started to see a lot more female athletes. It's an injury that really plagues female football, soccer players, and also female basketball players, but all field sports are especially dangerous for this. So doctors and scientists, they started trying to figure out why this was, and they've had all these different theories. So I'll just kind of tell you some of the different theories, and then I'll tell you what they've decided. So one of the first major theories was that because women have wide hips, they have something called, well, everyone has a Q angle, which is the angle of your femur coming down and meeting your knees. And because women have higher hips, your Q angle tends to be a little bit wider. And instead of going straight down as men's femurs might, there's a little bit of an angle, which could mean that women are naturally a little bit sort of a little bit valgus when their femur hits their knee. So it could just be more stress there. They did a bunch of studies on Q angle, and they found that it was inconclusive, so they weren't really sure about that. There's another theory just about knee structure. There's another angle in here that isn't related to Q angle, but it's just how your knee is put together. Women also tend to have greater angles there as well, and that is sometimes associated with ACL injury, sometimes it's not. There are other theories just talking about cross-sectional area and width of your various ligaments and muscles. So it could just be that the ligaments are relatively smaller. Could be the structure of where the various ligaments attach to your knee. It could be that women sometimes just have smaller muscles and they don't have as much muscular development around here. We have found that absolutely if you increase quadricep strength, then that can help reduce injuries. But then we have another issue, and this is one of the more popular ones nowadays, which is that women tend to have an imbalance between their quadricep muscles, their anterior leg muscles, and their posterior leg muscles, specifically their hamstrings. So a lot of women tend to be more quadricep dominant as opposed to having an even balance between hamstrings and quadriceps. So that could be an issue, is that there's an imbalance of strength. Finally, there's another layer to add on top of this, which is just hormonal issues. So women tend to have laxer joints anyway. There tends to be more play around the joints. Women are more likely to be hypermobile than our men, so I'm quite stiff. You can see I don't really have any hypermobility here. Whereas when I'm working with a lot of female clients, you'll have a lot of female clients, when they extend their elbow, they can go into hyperextension. When they sort of extend back their fingers or their wrist, they can go into hyperextension. So if you're more mobile, if you have laxer joints, you are much more likely to have these sorts of knee injuries. Couple that with monthly cycles, and depending at which phase of the cycle women are in, their joint laxity can go up or down. There's also been some interesting studies looking at how birth control pills can affect things like collagen density and laxity in joints. So it's really, really complicated. You don't want to pretend that it's just one thing. That being said, what we have found is that there are lots and lots and lots of great exercise systems, sort of prehab preventative injury systems that can really, really lessen and mitigate the chance of getting an ACL injury. And there's a bunch of reasons why those could work. But if you generally have this sort of rule of thumb where you want to work on some sort of dynamic balance, okay? So sort of coming in different directions, getting used to working on one leg. You definitely want to have some sort of hamstring strengthening. You want to have overall leg strengthening. Especially there's a lot of systems that are very popular working with your vastus medialis obliquus, so your big inside quad muscle. That's going to be a big thing. Any sort of reaction training. And then finally, one of the other ways that you can help prevent ACL injuries is by providing better motor patterns for people. I'll go into this a bit more depth when we do some more peer coaching, but a classic example is when people land, okay, you want to give people a landing pattern so that they push their hips back and they can absorb all that energy into their full body, into their knees, their ankles, their hips, rather than doing an anterior dominant landing pattern where people might land and their knees come forward. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The point of this session is just to give you different tools to think about things, and also to start thinking about things like jumping movement quality, and especially landing movement quality, and how you can apply that to your coaching when you're running other sessions. Okay, for the warm-up today, we're going to spend a lot more time working on your legs and your knees and your hamstrings, working on your stability, working on power production, power absorption. So we're starting with some classic movements, but there will be a lot of movements in this warm-up you may not have seen before or haven't seen recently. First one is just the empty hinges. We do these all the time. Just want to get people to start thinking about their hamstrings and also pushing their hips back. This will be a big part of the athletic landing. So when we work on the athletic landing, we're going to do a version of squat that instead of a knee forward, hips down low squat, it's going to be a hips back squat. So we want to start getting people to think about just their hamstrings, so do some of those. We also want to start thinking about energy absorption and just sort of dealing with jumping and landing. So I like to start off with some ankle hops. So all I do is I just stand up tall, and then I just start bouncing on my ankles just like this. I'm not using my knees much. I'm just getting my gastrocnemius, my soleus muscles ready to absorb some energy. You can practice adding some height to this. You can also do this while you're doing question of the day. After that, we'll just do some light forward and backwards running, getting people used to that because there is a little bit of running today. Then some speed skaters. These are the lateral jumps. There's lots of variations of these. But what I would do is I would just first start with a little movement back and forth. And then you can practice adding a little bit more distance and a little bit more height and thinking about how you absorb that energy and then redirect it. Okay, so some of those. After that, some side scramble runs. And this is something that Jill and I used to do a lot when we were living in Thailand, and we lived this hill, and we do sort of these hill runs. And I realized that the way that Jill was running down the hill was much better than me. So when we were running down the hill, Jill was very good at keeping her center of gravity over her body, not letting her legs get too far in front. And instead of running straight down, she kind of had this sideways hopping sort of motion here. You can do these forwards and backwards. It's just this kind of side to side, thinking about keeping your center of gravity over your feet, not getting too far ahead with your feet. A couple of those. One of the things you'll find a lot with the deceleration work is you end up in a position that looks quite a lot like a B stance or a kickstand squat. So it's good to do some of those. So you can check our B stance video. But generally we want to find a position where our feet are staggered, our back foot is roughly, the toes are roughly aligned with the heel. Your knees can come over the toes on this one, so you don't need to keep your shins back. You can keep your heels off the ground on this one. You're just coming down. It's sort of like a very short lunge, and you can adjust it as you need to. I'm just getting used to doing this a little bit, okay? And like I said, you can let your heels come off the ground on this one. We're just sort of getting our body used to different positions, and when we're decelerating a lot, we'll kind of end up in a position like that. So it's good to work some of those in. Some one-legged glute bridges, because it's summertime. We should get some glute bridges in while we're lying on the ground. So with the glute bridges, when you come down here, just kind of get your heels close to your bum. Okay, I like to go ahead and get my hands out to the side for stability. I kick one leg out, bum touches the ground, and then I squeeze my bum as hard as I can to try to get full extension, and I come back. Just a few of these. I find that doing the unilateral ones, I feel them more in my glutes, but then by isolating it, I find that I'm less likely to hyperextend in my lumbar spine, and I can just isolate that a little bit more. So do those until you get kind of a nice pump in your glutes. Hamstring walkouts, which are another nice way to do hamstring engagement. These are sort of a gentler alternative to Nordic variations. So starting off in this glute position, really focus on squeezing your bum, and then you're just going to bring your heels out while maintaining hip extension. You can actually hold this position. This is a supine shoulder to heel plank. You'll notice there's space between the ground and my bum, and then I come back up again. That's a good one. After that, we have some Patrick step-ups. So Patrick step-ups, I'm just standing here. You put one foot out in front of the other. The further away it is, the more challenge it'll be. You just bend your knee and touch just like that. Oop. A little bit of balance work here, but it's just getting your ankles and knees. Then actually what I usually do is I'll do a heel touch on this one. And again, it just gets all these different parts of your body ready. And it's sort of, it's good to do the unilateral work, because if you have one leg or system that's weaker than the other, that might be one that's more susceptible to injury, or you might favor your other leg, which might force an injury on the other side. After that, some reverse Nordic sits. These aren't required for everybody, but if you're quite a stiff guy like I am, naturally when I sit down, my heel won't touch my bum, so I just hang out here. It's not a super restful position. So what I can do is I can come up, I can come down, and I just lean back a little bit, feel a little bit of a stretch. If it gets too intense, I can come back up again, come back down again, lean into it. So for me, just leaning back here is a really nice stretch in my quads. It's not going to be a stretch for everybody, but if you have tighter clients, this is quite a big one. And you'll see that after just a few seconds of doing this, now at least I can get my bum to touch my heels, which I couldn't do before I'd warmed up. And if I just relax in here, I can kind of come back and forth and use the leverage of bringing my body back just to kind of get into a deeper stretch. So now I can just kind of hang out here. Now my bum is touching my heels, and the movement is more restful for me. But it's a good way to stretch out those quadriceps. After that, we've got some quad hamstring curls with a squeeze. When I say quad, I mean quadricep in this case. Come down here, one leg out. And the big thing with these is I'm really going to do a squeeze at the end. So I'm not just kicking it back and forth like this. I'm really actively squeezing at the end and then relaxing. Squeezing at the end and then relaxing. Other one up, and I'm just squeezing. And this is just another way to work your hamstrings and really squeeze at the end. Really think about squeezing it tight, because that's where the benefit is going to be for most people. After you do that, we're going to do some landing pattern squats. So because we spend so much time getting people in low squats with their hips below parallel, their chest up high, that's a really useful pattern to have. But when we're landing, we don't need to do that style of landing. In fact, when we're landing, especially if people who are naturally knee dominant anyway, it's good to have them do a hips back position. So if you do these during warm up, you'll see that people will have much better landing position when you do the lemming walks. So if you want more of a wow, aha moment, you can not do these in the warm-ups and teach them afterwards, either or, but I'll show you them right now. So for these, I'm just going to do a little jump, and when I jump, I'm just going to land. I'm going to push my bum back, and I'm going to land in a position where my knees are over my middle toe like this, and my my shins aren't coming too far forward, so I'm not jamming my knees forward. When I absorb the energy, I'm absorbing the energy by pushing my hips back and coming back up, and then you can get into a pattern with this. So you just go. That's going to give people a better landing pattern. We'll talk about landing patterns a little bit more in one of the peer coaching. And then the other end of this jumping landing pattern are tuck jumps, which are really important as well. So we can do some tuck jumps. So we bring our knees up as high as we can. We can turn these into squat jumps. And those are going to be useful as well to get people away from their knee flicks or their donkey kicks when they're doing their jumps. So that's going to be the main warm-up. There's one more thing that we're going to do with a partner, which I'll show you in a second. All right, so because we're talking a lot about hamstrings today and getting our hamstrings stronger, it's good to do some form of a Nordic progression or regression. If you want more detail, you can check out our video on Nordic progression regressions. I just want to show you another version today. So I'm going to have Jill, however she wants to, she can sit on my feet or she can use her knees, whatever feels good, okay? For the Nordic, you can just try to do a classic Nordic where I'm just going to come out here as far as I can. Okay, and I'm going to try to come back up. All right. That's okay. That's good enough. Most people won't come that far out. So sometimes people put their knees on. So you can put your knees and then hold my calves down. See how that feels. Obviously you want someone of a similar size and weight when they're doing it. The other way you can progress the Nordics is by breaking at the hip. So instead of keeping my hips open all the way, okay, what I can do is I can come out here and then I can break at the hip and try to come back up. That's still quite advanced. So one of the ones that I quite like is you can try to do a Nordic with my hips open. I'm really going to focus on my hamstrings, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out a little bit, and when I hit the spot where I'm starting to get challenged, what I do is I just do a walkout, like if I were doing an inchworm. But you can see I'm still engaging my hamstrings when I do it, okay? So you can still see that I'm taking a lot of weight. I'm just here to support myself. So I'll come back out, I'll find tension, and then just like I'm doing an inchworm walkout, I come back up, and you can see how much Jill's holding me down. That's a really, really nice way to get full range of motion in while still engaging your hamstrings, and you have control over how difficult it is. So once you've done the rest of your warm-up, okay, just have people do some variation of Nordics, just 2 or 3 sets with your partner, really quick. Try these Nordic worm walkouts because I think they're a really nice variation. Okay, for the peer coaching, we've got 3 parts of peer coaching today, but they're all pretty short, so they shouldn't take too long. The first one is closed eye athletic position landing check. So I was talking a little bit about the athletic landing position before. I'll talk about it in more detail. One of the issues we see, one of the sort of movement patterns that can be correlated with ACL injuries is landing pattern mechanics. And depending on how you land, it could mean that you're more likely to get an injury. And obviously when you're in field sports, there's way more variables. You're probably not gonna be doing a classic bilateral landing. You're gonna be running, jumping, skipping, but it's good to go ahead and teach people this bilateral landing anyway. And the big thing is you wanna think about all these different energy absorption systems that you have in your body. You can absorb through your ankles, you can absorb through your knees, you can absorb through your hips. And really what you wanna do is, just like we talk about summation of forces, when you're trying to create energy, that triple extension, there's sort of, a corollary, which I guess would be absorption of forces or negation of forces. And this would be, if you have all that energy, where does it go when you land, and can you reuse it? Can you redirect it? So for today, we're just going to talk about the energy absorption. And you want to think about how can we use all these systems when we come down. And you want to use your hips a little bit, you want to use your knees a little bit, your balls of your feet, your ankles a little bit. So when you land, you do a classic athletic position landing. The issue is that some people naturally when they land, they have more of a knee dominant thing. And what you'll see sometimes is people, when they land, their knees will come forward like that. They sort of end up in this position where they just shove their knees forward, and that's really all they have because they don't have the pattern of pushing their hips back. Okay, if they land from a higher height, their knees will just come more and more forward, and often more and more valgus. And we really want to get people into that pattern of bringing their hips back when they land, because that's a really nice way to absorb energy and reuse it. So first thing we want to do is we just want to see, well, how do people land when they're not thinking about it? This is why I was saying you don't need to run the landing pattern squats in the warm-up if you want to have more of a contrast, more of an aha moment. And this is a really easy drill. It's a closed eye athletic position landing check. And a lot of times people say, well, how should I land? What should my foot position be? This one's really easy, okay? Make sure everyone's in a clear area. Make sure there's no sticks or holes or divots or anything like that. And you have people close their eyes and you just have them jump 3 times, you know, high, but not the highest they've ever jumped, like a good proper jump. And then at the end of the 3rd jump, they open their eyes, they look down, and they see what position their feet are in. So I've got a weird position. I'll talk about that in a second. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, and I look down. Yep. So this is my athletic position. You might notice my left foot comes out a little bit. This is my bad ankle, and I don't have a lot of dorsiflexion on this side. So I naturally have this pattern when I absorb energy. I kind of put my foot out a little bit, which is also how I squat. And you know, it used to be worse. Now this is probably about as good as it's going to get, and that's fine. It doesn't really slow me down too much. But what you'll see is when some people land, okay, some people have naturally wider stances, some people have naturally narrower stances. That probably has something to do with hip width and structure, but there could be a whole bunch of other factors as well. So this is sort of good. This will be your classic athletic position, your deadlift position. Some people might use it as a squat position, but probably most people's squat position will tend to be a little bit wider. But that being said, if people naturally have a wide landing position, they're probably going to have a wider squat position as well. So just get people to do it. They look down. That's going to be their athletic position. So keep that in mind, that everyone's going to have a slightly different position. So don't get into the habit of over cueing people, having them make their stances wider or narrower. Essentially, whatever they do naturally is probably going to be fine. You know, you might see some people who, for whatever reason, have like really oddly wide positions or really oddly narrow positions, and we can fix that a little bit. That might be a holdover from something else. The other thing we want to think about is when we're landing, okay, what are our knees doing? Are our knees lined up over our toes? And that'll take us into the second peer coaching. But first peer coaching, put people in partners or even groups on this one so they can see. You could even have group A and group B, have everyone line up and jump, and then you can look at their position. And it's worth having other people look at the positions just to show that everybody's a little bit different, and that's okay. So that's a nice short one. People will get a lot out of that, okay? Peer coaching 2 is going to be what we call, Jill calls lemming walks, but you could also just call box step off landings, something like that. We call them lemming walks because when you get a whole group of people, you see these people, they walk over here, they get on the box, they stand up, and then they just kind of jump off and they do a big line. It almost looks like a music video. The key with this one is you want to make sure that you have some people standing over here so they can see the landing from a few different angles, from the front, from the side, 3/4 perspective, etc. And then you want to have people who are coming off. So a good way to do this is have everyone set up into partners, and then one of the partners is watching while the other partner is going through. You can still have people line up and do it, but just make sure you're watching your partner. So the way this works is you come over here, you stand on the box. We're not jumping, we're just stepping off. So there's no big jump here. And just from here, people step off. We want to see what their landing position looks like. And then we just want to check some things. We're especially looking at hips and knees. So you land like that. And what I'm looking for is when you land, you absorb the energy by pushing your hips back, okay? And are your knees tracking over your toes? So for a lot of athletes, for a lot of members, especially female members, if they don't have that hip back movement, they're gonna be much more likely to have their knees come in. And this is what we're really looking out for, is when they land, are their knees coming in like that? And I didn't even consciously think about bringing my knees in. I just thought about not bringing my bum back. Whereas naturally, if I come up here and I land, I think about bringing my bum back, okay, then I've got much better knee alignment. So that's the first thing we want people to start thinking about, is how, if you can absorb that energy with that hip back, that athletic squat landing position, how is that going to affect what everything's doing downstream and upstream? So this is a really useful one. Give people enough time to kind of practice and see if we can get them to stop bringing their knees in. If you have somebody who absolutely cannot control their knee position, that means that jumping is be contraindicated for them. So you need to find some kind of scale down that's going to allow them to participate without putting their knees in this position over and over and over again. Okay, so the third bit of peer coaching observation is going to be on takeoff and landing in your jumps. Specifically, we want to avoid what's called a donkey kick or a knee flick, and to ensure that we have nice landing. So we know what a nice landing looks like, but now we're going to start adding variables, add some real life application. And it's good to think about what are the mistakes that people make when they're jumping that are going to prevent them from landing safely or having good form. So one of the biggest issues you see is that when people are jumping over high things, they don't have the pattern of lifting their knees up. Instead, what they do is they kick their legs back like this. This is going to be really common, especially with female members, quite a lot if they've never really had any experience jumping while lifting their knees. So this is often called a donkey kick or a knee flick, and it's just this little number right here. The problem with that is it's very, very hard to get a good landing. It's very hard to land in time if you flick your knees back. And also there's a lot of times when people are jumping over, they'll kind of flick their knees sideways because they're afraid of hitting their legs on the bar or something like that. So that means their knees are going to be out of alignment. So when they land, it's going to be much, much harder for them to get that nice, solid, balanced landing position. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get people comfortable lifting up their legs when they're jumping like that, rather than flicking their knees out. And you can just see, okay, if I just practice jumping like that, I'm not lifting my knees up super high, but that's going to feel much, much better than if you do this and every single time you flick your legs back. It's very hard to get back into a good position. And the way your body absorbs the energy, it just doesn't feel nice. It feels much, much nicer to have your legs underneath you, have your feet underneath you, and absorb that energy. So we're going to do some progressive stick jumping like we have in the past, except the difference is today we don't really care about going as high because we're not doing burpee over-unders or any kind of jump over-under. We just want to get people over. And we're going to do the progressive stick jumping, maybe getting people up to about a tire height or so, depending on what they're comfortable with. You can scale as you need to. But we're going to focus on lifting the knees, and we're going to focus on a nice landing. So that's going to be much more important than height today. So we're not focusing on height, we're focusing on the landing. So when we jump, okay, we're going to go ahead and lift our knees up, and when we land, we're going to go ahead and practice that athletic landing like that. So you can do the progressive jumps higher and higher and higher and higher. If you get to the point where people start donkey kicking, then we need to spend some time there so that they can take that pattern and turn it into that pattern. For the conditioning today, we're going to have athletic landing jump overs. So this part of the peer coaching will feed into it, and it's going to be jump over and land, turn around, jump over and land, and practicing that nice landing and takeoff. We only have 4 and 4. It's not super, super high numbers. The idea is not to get people tired. We don't want them to be fatigued. We want to keep the numbers low enough so they can focus on quality rather than focusing on height or repetitions or anything like that. All right, the last bit of movement prep I want to talk about is this idea of acceleration and deceleration. This is one of the last things, deceleration training, where you teach people how to absorb the energy and not put their body in weird positions, is going to be really highly correlated with preventing ACL injuries. So it's nice to do some acceleration, deceleration work, and I'm obviously not a sprinter or sprinting coach, so when I do it, it's going to look much different from a professional, but you can still get the basics. So for the conditioning, I'm recommending about 8 meters. This is a little bit shy of 8 meters, but you get the idea. And the way that it's set up is we have a line right here. This will be the beginning. You can sort of start behind it. You run out, and then for the actual conditioning, you'll have 2 sets of cones. You'll have your 1 meter deceleration cone, and then you'll have your final cone. So you have 1 meter to decelerate, and you'll see I've got 2 different colored cones over there. And the way we're going to decelerate today is we're going to use something that are called multi-steps or quick steps, and that's when you're running, okay, and it's time for you to stop. Instead of getting your feet out in front of you or doing something weird or coming over yourself like this, you want to anticipate the deceleration, and that when you start decelerating, and this will look better when I'm running, is you do these quick little steps, and then you allow your body to get down low and absorb the energy as you're doing it. This stops you from toppling over yourself, and it's a nice way to create this sort of eccentric deceleration pattern. So I'll just do a few and we'll see how they look, and this will be a variation of what you're doing when it comes time for the conditioning. So this will be a practice session you run before the conditioning. You have the cones set up. Everybody has enough room in their own lane, so they're not going to fall over each other. The coach can say 3, 2, 1, go. You try to come up to a sprint, and when you get there, you get down low and you try to decelerate without crossing over that cone. Then we're going to do a backwards run like this. Do a few set of these. 3, 2, 1, go. And you just do those little shuffly steps. And that's going to be how we practice our stopping. I'll do one more. Coach says 3, 2, 1, go. Just like that, okay? And then you do your backwards run back. And this will be a variation of what we do in the conditioning, where people will do 4 sets of these forward runs, really fast, explosive forward runs, decelerate with a backwards run back. And we'll put all that together, and that'll be your conditioning. Okay, so I've got the workout set up behind me. You'll need some lanes for some cones, enough room so people feel confident running backwards, so make sure you have it sort of spread out. You need some kind of jumping apparatus for this. I have the box, but we don't want people to focus on jumping high today. Remember, we're focusing on takeoff quality and landing quality. So you could just have tire, you could have sticks, just as long as they're jumping and they're jumping well. Don't have people focus on the height on this one. So it doesn't have to be a bunch of plyo boxes. It could be anything low that you have available to you that's going to help people jump well. And then a kettlebell. The format of the workout is 6 rounds for time, and it's going to go like this. You're going to start off with 3 and 3 athletic landing jump overs. So jump, 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 jump back and forth for a total of 6. 3 there, 3 back, alternating. The jump should be exactly the same though. They're not unilateral or anything. It's the same jumping pattern. 15 kettlebell swings, classic Russian kettlebell swings. You can go pretty heavy on these today. And then 3 of 8 meters out, 8 meters back, forward, decelerate backwards runs. And when you set up the cones, make sure you have that 1 meter of deceleration zone. So it's 8 meters in total, but you have 7 meters, and 7 meters you put a cone so you can decelerate. So it's going to go like this. Coach is going to say 3, 2, 1, go. Remember, we're focused on a high quality double leg takeoff landing. We're going to lift our knees. No donkey kicks today. So we're going to lift our knees and jump. And that's what we're really focusing on, the quality of the landing and the jumping. So don't have people worry about going too quickly. We're square. And what we're really trying to avoid today is people kicking their legs up or doing a sort of sideways shimmy thing like that. Once you've done your 3 and 3, you have your 15 kettlebell swings, classic swings, somewhere up to eyeball level. And this is good because it's also showing your hamstrings how to absorb energy, which is a big part of what we're doing today. Once I've done my 15, I'm going to come over to wherever the lines are. I'm going to do 3 sets here. Really have people do a proper sprint. They're only doing 3 of these, so they shouldn't do them mindlessly. So you're going to run up, run as fast as you can, and then down low, decelerate, just like that. I'll do one more. And it's going to be 6 rounds for time with a big emphasis on quality today.